Welcome to Policy Digest, the only food channel serving fresh education you can eat. Today we are going to be looking at a new take on an age-old recipe and then evaluating its impact on its home region. To do that, we are going to be traveling across the Atlantic to the birthplace of some of the most notable ancient civilizations, northern and eastern Africa, where we will find the longest northward flowing river in the world, the Nile. A little background on this recipe before we begin. The Nile flows through or along the border of 11 African countries, most notably Egypt, its most downstream member, and Ethiopia, one of its most upstream members. Its three main tributaries are the White Nile, the Atbara, and the Blue Nile, located in Ethiopia. It provides a variety of resources, including irrigation, nutrients, food, and hydroelectric potential, a renewable resource at the heart of today's discussion. You see, for over 5,000 years, Egypt has been utilizing the Nile River, and today it relies on the river for over 95% of its water usage. It has done so without objection, as the existing treaties governing riparian rights, or the rights of those to waters crossing their land, favored Egypt strongly, despite the country being the river's most downstream holder. Typically, riparian rights are non-interventionist, and as such favor those living upstream. But the river is not only drenched in the blood of the first plague of the Exodus, but also by the blood of colonialism and its institutions. These institutions maintained effective control over legal instruments in the region, and this is the context in which many Nile treaties were passed, the lot of them favoring Egypt, a country brokering the much sought-after accessibility between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Egypt has historically exploited many of the resources without issue due to these treaties. But recently, Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam project has created a divide on the Nile between the Nile's two political powerhouses. Egypt has threatened war over the building of the dam due to concerns over the critical water shortage it would create, and cites those treaties to justify prevention, whereas Ethiopia does not acknowledge the legitimacy of said treaties and promises to fill the reservoir slowly enough that it would not significantly impact Egypt's total flow volume. So is this Renaissance Dam recipe a worthwhile improvement, or is it a revolting take for a valid palate? The traditional recipe requires agricultural products, infrastructure, water, and a legal foundation. With limited arable land and water resources, it will never be self-sufficient in grains, vegetable oil, and animal proteins. In fact, 40% of Egypt's imports are food and agricultural products. Egypt is one of the world's largest importers of wheat, bringing in 12.5 million metric tons between July 2018 and 2019. In the same period, Egypt imported 9.3 million metric tons of corn, which accounts for only about 20% of its corn consumption. The country faces non-tariff barriers to trade, such as the application of non-science-based standards and inspection requirements, and this affects poultry parts, feather meal, retail dried dairy products, hormone-treated beef, and soy with the presence of ambrosia. Additionally, this closes off access to markets due to non-compliance with World Trade Organization commitments. This market environment impacts the 100 million people living in the most populous country in the Middle East and third most populous on the African continent. The country faces several food security challenges, including over-reliance on the Nile River, a demographic youth bulge blowing up the unemployment rate, and in fact, over half the population is under 25 years old, but less than 5% is over 65. Now that's a pin, not a pyramid. Despite increases in unit productivity, the country has not been meeting anywhere near its potential yields. The Food and Agriculture Organization's country programming framework for the government of Egypt outlined how the country could go about meeting its needs through 4 priority areas: agricultural information generation, sharing and dissemination, improving productivity and efficiency in the agricultural sector, sustaining rural community development, and conserving natural resources and adapting to the impacts of climate change. Priority Area A. Egypt needs accurate, accessible information. There is a need for technical assistance, training, and institutional development to enhance the processes of data collection from the field, assuring relevance, reliability, and validity. The outputs of this priority area include a functional information system to support proper informed decision-making and trained cadres. The decision support system is not the aim. Rather, perfectly competitive markets of agricultural inputs and outputs are. Priority Area B. The foci here are land use and management, irrigation modernization, increased crop, livestock, poultry, and fisheries production. Strategic objectives are to address both the quantity and unit productivity of arable land. Methods for doing this include a strategic crop coordination, increasing per capita animal protein consumption, and addressing the informal production processes of meat, milk, eggs, and chicken, while equipping locals with modern technology. Priority Area C focuses on the social determinants of food security, including education, gender equity, the marketing of agricultural products, and institutional reform to develop capacity. Priority Area D focuses on adapting to climate change, and this is perhaps the most important factor in how Egypt will address the impending Nile water crisis through the filling of the Renaissance Dam. Egypt is part of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, as well as the EU-Egypt FTA. Egypt's agricultural exports include potatoes, cotton, and fresh fruit, particularly citrus. Potatoes are not a major part of the average Egyptian's diet, but with increased water concerns, Egypt may be able to push and rely on new drought-resistant species of potatoes with longer roots. At the source of the Blue Nile, one of the two major tributaries to the Nile River which flows into Egypt, is Ethiopia. The country has a rich history of warding off colonial conquest, and its population is one of the most ethnically diverse on the continent. Despite this, it maintains strong institutions and peace, and under new leadership has gone from fighting a half-century-long secession battle with Eritrea to peaceful negotiations of an Ethiopian military base on land which Eritrea would offer as sovereign to Ethiopia. This is all part of Ethiopia's economic plan to unite the economic region through trade. Ethiopia's farming infrastructure is primarily composed of smallholder farms, but the government plans on expanding large-scale farm holdings and increasing the productivity of small-scale farms. With a growing population and increased water and energy needs, the country is looking towards the Grand Renaissance Dam to be able to meet its goal of increasing productivity and ensuring food security in a region which faces high levels of food insecurity and famine. As the geopolitically dominant player in Eastern Africa, Ethiopia is preparing to build the infrastructure to both become completely self-sufficient as well as influence the region through its agricultural exports. It is pursuing this strategy under the Agricultural Transformation Agency, which opens resources for the Ministry of Agriculture as well as other public and private entities. And this partnership put forth the Homegrown Economic Reform Plan, which in conjunction with other policy initiatives will utilize the benefits of the Grand Renaissance Dam to be able to meet its goals. Ethiopia is the continent's second largest producer of corn, and is planning on privatizing its sugar industry, which is slated to become one of the top 10 producers in the world. Ethiopian coffee is another big export, with the country being one of the leading exporters in the world, and the crop accounting for the greatest value of share of Ethiopia's agricultural exports. The country's production of beans and other low-intensity crops allow it to ward off the climate and food security challenges it is facing. As we see, the Grand Renaissance Dam would require changes to the agricultural policy environment in the region. Egypt would be pressed to adapt its agricultural strategy. Instead of viewing this as an opportunity for war, if the two countries could view this as an opportunity for innovation and partnership, the two would be positioned to bring a lot of value to the economic community of the northern and eastern economic blocs. In fact, the economic cooperation could galvanize the fragile economic unions in the region as the country becomes more and more dependent on one another in the face of climate change, bringing on increasing drought and desertification, which create the circumstances for food insecurity. While both Egypt and Ethiopia are members of the African Union, an economic union of 54 member states, the organization has not intervened or served as a mediator in finality for this dispute, though it has served as a platform for the development of ideas to address the issues surrounding the conflict, such as trade network infrastructure within the region. The Grand Renaissance Dam would decrease Egypt's agricultural land by about 30%, according to a study, which evaluated the impact of the dam on Egyptian water flows, and included various scenarios for differential fill rates of the dam. The study also found that over time, however, this impact could be reversed and in fact contribute to Egyptian water access by reducing the impacts of flooding, which can cause millions of dollars of damage to smallholding farms lining the river. However, the energy production from the ground Renaissance Dam can be used to fund various projects, including agricultural infrastructure, which can help alleviate many of the problems associated with climate change, as the demands of agriculture change in the coming years. The Great Divide of the Nile River's riparian crisis is an opportunity for growth in the region as the limits of the agriculture meet the demands of a changing climate, and the politics of an archaic era settle as the silt on the Nile Delta. Ultimately, this will cause many changes in the region's agricultural systems, but the changes depend wholly on the management of the situation by the concerned states.